in regards to people on the right. So as this Trump-Garland battle intensifies, who gonna blink first? Let's meet tonight's party panel. We've got senior editor for The Federalist, Chris Bedford, is back in front of the Capitol. We've got Democrat strategist and former Biden campaign surrogate. He brings truth to power, and he always brings cocktails to the picnic. Kevin Walling, and Based Politics co-founder, that's right, and Foundation for Economic Education content manager, my karaoke partner, Hannah Cox. There we are. So let's discuss this, Chris. The president just wants his stuff back. Is it his stuff, and do you think the judge is going to unseal the affidavit?
I don't have any faith that the judge is going to unseal the affidavit here. I would love to see that, though. I'd love to actually see the motivation for raiding the president's home. The one thing, the silver lining I've seen in this, though, is how skeptical, finally, the American people are of the FBI, of the intel community, of what the government says. Just 4 or 5 years ago, the FBI raiding the house of a former president would cause everyone of both parties to gasp and wonder what's coming, what awful thing could be coming. Then we dealt with the Russia hoax. We dealt with everything that came after that. And this cycle of Republicans kind of scatter, they duck their heads, they don't know what to say. People start to worry and pull on the edges. Fact checkers come out, and then years later it turns out to be completely bogus. Is now moving from months or years to literally minutes and hours in some cases, where people are just saying, hold on a second, unseal that affidavit, show us your cards. You need to have transparency when you try to arrest political opponents.
Yes, and Kevin, the thing about this case, which happens with everything concerning the former president, is it has divided the country. There are people who support the former president who say that he is once again being unfairly targeted, and the FBI is using a battering ram unjustly to target him in ways that has never happened to a former president. And then you have people on the left saying that he is so yucky and untoward. There has been a celebration from everyone from Stephen Colbert to the entire cast of hacks at MSNBC. Where do we stand?
Yeah, Kenny, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, listen, this has only further divided us as a country, and we retreat into our silos based on what we think going into this situation about Donald Trump. And certainly, to Chris's point, there's many more questions than answers. I agree with Chris that it's unlikely that this federal judge will release the affidavit in its purest form as Donald Trump is calling for. But I think what you're seeing is Donald Trump is playing this out in the court of public opinion rather than in the legal space. And we know a lot of this documentation is about a grand jury that's been impaneled, which often operates in secrecy before charges are brought against an individual in this country. So what we will see if this plan that Donald Trump is enacting works out in terms of playing it out in public, rather than the legal smart thing to do, which is to really lawyer up and be fully prepared to counter these arguments in the court of law.
Well, maybe he feels it's a political attack and he's responding politically. Aside from that and the issues of divisive politics, Hannah, I mean, couldn't we deal with a little bit more transparency in this country? And I ask that because if we have all the facts and we know everything that has gone on, then there are far fewer questions, because it is in those vacuums where people fill them up with their own conspiracies and their own ideas, which only further divide us. So, let us see everything so we can make up our minds, and maybe we will finally come to an objective truth here.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Look, I'm not Team Trump. I don't think Trump has always been above book. And I certainly don't think that a politician or a former politician is above the law. But that being said, we know the FBI and the Department of Justice are often not above book either. These are people who have been very corrupt throughout our history. They've gone after political opponents. They've often made up evidence. They've lied under oath to put innocent people in jail. They've worked to label parents as domestic terrorists in the past year. So I don't really trust them that much, and I think that we need to see that they actually had evidence to obtain this warrant. That's important. And when they say that they don't want to put that evidence before the American people, their excuse for that is basically that it would make their investigation harder. But guess what? That's supposed to be the case. The entire Bill of Rights, well, not the entire, but most of it, goes towards saying that defendants should have a shot at standing up to an always overreaching, always overpowerful, and always overfunded government. So I think that it's really important that Republicans start standing up for those rights. It's funny to me, Trump all of a sudden sees the value in the Fifth Amendment, right? Yeah. This is something he used to criticize and say only guilty people would plead the Fifth and not talk. No, we need to have these very important civil liberties protected. expected for any and everybody, and that's something that I hope Republicans take away as a larger theme from all this.
Yeah, he's never really been a constitutional scholar, but he's getting a quick tutorial now. Excuse me. We will see what happens here. We're actually going to talk about it a little bit more later in the show with Andy McCarthy, because he has some interesting thoughts on privilege and what that means for the former president. And we'll see the panel in just a little bit. All right, so